Now I'd like to move on. We're going to have some presentations from individual members of our organisation. First of all, we have Derek McKim, who's the Islepact Project Coordinator, and he's going to talk to us about our achievements and future challenges. Derek.
Thank you, Chairman. We now move into the more detailed presentations from islands and regions. So firstly, what I'm going to do is give a brief overview of the Islepact project, our achievements to date, and to talk briefly about some of the future challenges. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. I'm making no apologies for reinforcing some of the points which earlier speakers have made, because I think they're actually quite important. It is an initiative parallel to the Covenant of Mayors, but we would see ourselves as distinctive from that. There's no competition between the two things, but they are actually quite different in our eyes. It's a political engagement. It's an engagement on behalf of our politicians, giving a commitment to the future to exceed the 2020 targets, but also recognising the specificities of islands. We have fragile ecosystems. We've got structural handicaps. Many of our islands have got populations which are in decline. The previous speaker was just talking about tourism. Many of our islands' populations change markedly over the tourist season. There's a very low level of indigenous population, and then they will rise very rapidly, typically in the summer. And that may lead to fluctuations in energy demand and fluctuations in demand for water. The Pact of Islands opened for signatures at the end of June 2010. You've just seen another 3 signatories. So we now have 65, and I think as Mr. Subla said earlier, that's probably a lot more than we had envisaged initially, so we're pleased with that. The second leg of what we're about are the Islands Sustainable Energy Action Plans, and Felipe Oliveira is going to speak after me in more detail about this, but again a brief overview as to what these are about. They're based on provision of information, collecting information, in many cases for the first time, about energy supply and about demand. So establishing where we are today, establishing where we would want to be in 2020 to achieve the targets, and mapping out how we're going to get there. And then putting all that together in these ISAPs, which again are parallel to the CAPs for the Covenant of Mayors, to achieve the targets and those policy objectives. And we would also see them as a tool to promote territorial cohesion within our islands. So where are we today? We now have, as I've just said, 65 island authorities have signed the Pact of Islands. And these are the islands. And more islands are in the process of joining. And I'm personally pleased to see the Balearics literally back in the room today, and hopefully they'll become part of the process again. We've submitted 53 ISAPs to the European Commission, and again, that is significantly higher than we had originally envisaged. And from these, we've identified 77 projects, which have then been analysed, and this has come up with over 50 bankable projects. And again, to put that into context for you, these bankable projects have a total investment value of about 950 million euros. In other words, just under €1 billion. And if you relate that to what Christina Deli said earlier, by the Covenant of Mayors. I think the figure she was quoting was 40 billion euros. So €1 billion for islands with a population of 12 million people, I think is actually quite significant. And these bankable projects would probably allow for something like 600 jobs. Again, quite significant figures. John Stubler mentioned in his presentation the reduction of CO2 and the percentage figures. And these are the actual figures in terms of the impact of the project. And quite clearly also, the figures, for example, from Denmark will change by 2020 anyway. So the difference that we will make by 2020 on an island basis will probably be even more significant, I would suggest, than the 31%. So we are going to make a significant difference in terms of CO2 emission reduction. Over 18 million tonnes. It's again much more, I think, than we had anticipated. Where do we go from here? We are looking at 2020. It seems quite a long way away. We're in 2012 now. The project is finishing at the end of November, but it doesn't just finish there. We are working towards 2020. We have been in touch with the European Parliament, and they, as Jean-Didier was saying earlier, have been very supportive in terms of asking the Commission for continued support. DG Energy is saying at the moment, and you might want to take this away with you, John, that there will be no additional support for the continuation of the Pact of Islands process. And the DG has proposed merging our initiative with the Covenant of Mayors. But as I said earlier, our view would be that it's quite distinctively different, and I don't think merging would serve our purposes or arguably the purposes of the Covenant of Mayors. So as Jean-Didier Ash said earlier, the president of CPMR, President Capellacci, wrote to President Barroso in September this year, rejecting the proposal to merge the Pact of Islands with the Covenant of Mayors. President Barroso wrote back on the 12th of November, and discussions are ongoing, and we will want to continue those, and hopefully we will have a positive outcome, which will not be just a merger. Our main concerns: this particular project is ending literally at the end of this month. There's no funding immediately identified for the Pact of Islands process past 2012. There is still the possibility of merger, which we're not in favour of. We've got the more than 50 identified bankable projects with an investment value of just under €1 billion, which are ready to go, but we need to find the finance to make them fly. There's still a great need for capacity building, particularly on some of the smaller islands. And there's an ongoing need to monitor the emissions, the figure that John Stubler was raising earlier, and go back to the Commission every 2 years. This is an obligation in the Pact. We need to keep doing that. But again, there's no funding available. So in conclusion, it's important to recognise that it's not just a specific project, Pact of Islands. It's actually a process. It's a way of working. It's a way of doing things. I think, yes, we can show that islands, even though we're small, with a total population at a European level of about 12 million, we can be at the forefront of the fight against climate change. We can make a significant difference, both in terms of showing the way forward for others and making a significant difference within our own islands. We would argue that there are no barriers in the fight against climate change. There are only opportunities which can benefit our islands. And in my own islands, in the Outer Hebrides, we see climate change as presenting very good opportunities for investment and jobs in renewables in particular. As I said earlier, our population, and the population of many islands, is decreasing. We would see renewables providing a sustainable future for islands. And in order to make this work, we need your support, the support of everybody in the room, not just the islands, to continue working together. So we would see that as the way forward. We'll now continue at a more detailed level, starting with Felipe on the ISAPs. So I'll pass on to Felipe. Thank you.